Hey there, welcome back to the Steel City Sports Podcast, and today we're going to be continuing our tiers video series, and today we have the borderline teams. So what exactly is this tier? Well, I believe some of these teams will make the playoffs and some of them will not. If any of them made it, I wouldn't be surprised. So these are like your probably 8 to 10-ish win teams, somewhere in that range. These are the borderline playoff teams. Let's get into them. Our first team in this category is the New York Jets. So I think they're definitely a difficult team to rank because they had some promise last year. They went 7-10 with probably the worst quarterback situation in the entire league. It's obviously up for debate, but it was rough quarterback play last year, and they still were able to win 7 games. They made a couple appearances on my power rankings video. So there were times last year where I thought that they were a top 10 team. And it makes sense because their defense is elite. I really like their defense, especially in this situation, having a defensive head coach. Robert Saleh has really built a juggernaut on defense there. So that side of the ball is good. Offensively, I think there's a lot of question marks because Aaron Rodgers is coming off of one of his worst seasons. Last year was kind of rough with the Packers. And people think like the last 5 games, Aaron Rodgers turned things around last season. Like the team went 4-1, but Aaron Rodgers individually was not great during that run. He only threw 5 touchdowns in 5 games. So I don't know. I do think he's going to be better this year than next year. He definitely has some more motivation, kind of a chip on his shoulder, wants to prove to the world that he is still Aaron Rodgers. But this is definitely going to be one of the worst O-lines he's ever played behind. It's young and unproven. And the offensive weapons around him, like Breece Hall, I really liked Breece Hall last year, but he's coming off an ACL injury, which I have to believe it before I see it to think he's going to be the same player. Garrett Wilson I really liked, but he was a rookie last year, so he still has some development. And Aaron, he struggled with building relationship with young receivers in the past. There's stuff to like here. I really like their defense. Aaron Rodgers is obviously a massive upgraded quarterback, but I don't know. If this team wasn't in this division with Buffalo and Miami, I would be a lot higher on them, but I just don't know. I think they really are on the borderline. Next up is my team, the Steelers. So there's a lot that I like about our team this year. I do think that there is a chance for the defense to be top 5 in the NFL. I really do believe we have the personnel in place to do that. TJ Watt is hopefully going to be healthy this season. Kind of had a bit of a down year last year, only played in like 10 or 11 games. So he'll be back fully healthy. We still got Cam Hayward, I think is one of the more underrated players in the league. The secondary, I think, had a massive improvement this offseason because although we lost Cam Sutton, which I'm sad about, we did bring in Patrick Peterson, a former perennial all-pro cornerback. He's obviously not at that level, but I still think he's probably an upgrade over what we had last year. Bringing Joey Porter Jr. from the draft, I think that guy's going to be an absolute monster, especially the fact that we got him in the second round. And then you, of course, have Minkah, who I contend is the best safety in football. I don't really even think it's that debatable. I think he's that much of a playmaker on defense. So there's a lot to like on defense. And offensively, you could see the pieces in place there that would lead you to think this is going to be a playoff team because Kenny Pickett really turned it up the last 6 games of last year. Kenny Pickett was elite. The receiving core, I think, is really good. George Pickens, I think, has superstar potential. Deontay Johnson has been our number 1 for a couple years now, and he's been pretty good. He needs to work on his drops, but, he's still a really nice, reliable receiver. We just brought in Allen Robinson, who, had a weird year with the Rams, but prior to that was, I think, the definition of an overachiever when you look at the quarterbacks throwing him the ball. And I like our running backs. Warren and Harris are really good. That's a nice 1-2 punch there. The tight end, Freiermuth, and Darnell Washington we got in the draft, I think is going to be a monster. And we also made some improvements to our offensive line. I think Broderick Jones is going to be great. I love his size and just physicality. And then, of course, we still have Tomlin. So there's a lot to like about the Steelers team. And, of course, I will make a more in-depth video solely about the Steelers and just doing a whole season breakdown. So stay tuned for that. So if I'm giving all this positivity, why are they in borderline? Well, it's simply the division. The division is going to be an absolute dogfight, and I actually have three of the teams in this division in this tier. So yeah, I have every team in the AFC North except the Bengals in this category because all these teams are so good that they can't all make playoffs. So that means I think you have Cincy, I think is clearly the best team in the division, but the other three teams, I just don't know. So that's why I have the Steelers, Ravens, Browns here. Let's talk about the Ravens. There's a lot to like about Baltimore. They have some really nice high-end talent. Lamar Jackson, when healthy, is one of the best quarterbacks in the game. He's won an MVP already for that reason. And yeah, he has his limitations come playoffs. Whenever you have to throw the ball, he is limited in that. But in a regular season, just making playoffs, this team definitely has potential to do that. I think they've put the best receiver core around Lamar that he's ever had in his pro football career. Odell, I don't really know what is a fair expectation for OBJ at this point in his career because, he's had his injuries. I think he missed all of last season. He didn't play a single game last year. So I don't know what a fair expectation for OBJ is. We know he's been elite many times in his career, but I don't know. Zay Flowers, I don't know enough about him to really give an opinion, but he's a first-round draft pick receiver, so I think that's the first time in the Lamar Jackson era where they've used a first-round pick to draft a receiver. So I like to see that. Obviously, you still got Mark Andrews. You still got a really stable O-line, although you did lose some key pieces on that line, which, that happens with age and all that. Defensively, it seems like Baltimore's always good defensively. It doesn't really matter who's on that side of the ball. And they definitely have lost some names. Like Calais Campbell's gone now. I don't know what the status of Marcus Peters is. I don't even know if he's on the team anymore, if he even plays, because he's dealt with some gruesome injuries. But you still got Marlon Humphrey. You still got Patrick Queen, who's really starting to come into his own. But I like Baltimore, but the division's really difficult. And a lot of their high-end players, Lamar, OBJ, their running backs, get hurt a lot. So that's why I just don't know exactly what to expect from Baltimore. They usually start off the year really good, and then Lamar gets hurt, and they go downhill. So we'll see. So sticking with the AFC North, we have the Cleveland Browns. I made a video about 2 months ago where I did the top, I don't know exactly how it was worded, but it was essentially the most intriguing teams for next year. And I had Cleveland actually as the number one team on that list because if they're getting Deshaun Watson whenever he was All-Pro, whenever he was, you look back to his 2018, his 2019 seasons where he was, I think you could make a case, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. If they're getting that Deshaun Watson, this team is going to be an absolute powerhouse. That's why Cleveland gave up so much to get Deshaun, not only in the trade, but also paying him the fully guaranteed deal. The team that they made the playoffs with was stacked. It was just Baker had his limitations. They were kind of overachieving that year. And they did the Deshaun Watson trade they pushed all their chips in the middle of the table. And they said, we're going all in with this roster. Our O-line is fantastic. We have a top 5 running back in the NFL. We have one of the best defensive players in the NFL. We have one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. All the positions that matter, we have elite players in all of them. So they decided to go out and get Deshaun Watson, who, when they traded for him, was kind of seen as a guy who could be a top 5 quarterback. Now, looking at last year, it's hard to really grasp how much last year we should take into account because he was coming off of, he didn't play the prior year at all, and he was suspended 11 games from that year. So he hadn't played in a long time. So are we going to blame it on rust? Are we going to blame it on the fact that he's on a new team? I don't know, but he was not good in his last 5 games last year. Not good at all. There wasn't really anything I saw that impressed me from Deshaun Watson. He was bad last season in the games that he played in. Going into this year, this is a make-or-break year for not only Deshaun, but I think for Stefanski. If they're not good, I think Stefanski's gone because they've had 2 extremely disappointing years these past 2 years. Watson, there's really not much you can do. You gave him the fully guaranteed contract. I think he's one of the most interesting players going into this year because we know he has the talent. Is he going to reach it again? I don't know. That's why they're in this category. The division's tough, and Watson's just unproven. Next is the Tennessee Titans. If you've listened to me at all last year, I've never been a big fan of the Titans. Not that I hate them for any reason. It's just I dislike the construction of their team. I don't think that they're a really well put together team. Even whenever they were the 1 seed back in 2021, it wasn't on this channel, but I was always really pushing back against the Titans. I didn't really see them as that kind of team. And look what happened. Their first playoff game, they got annihilated by the Bengals due to Ryan Tannehill flaming out and throwing 3 picks. So I've never been a big fan of them. I love Derrick Henry. I do. But outside of him, the team is just, I think, extremely overachieving because of Mike Vrabel. I think you can make a case Mike Vrabel is a top 5 head coach in the NFL. That's how good of a job he's done with Tennessee, because he's taken this team that on paper is not really that good, and they've been a perennial playoff team ever since he's gotten there. Ryan Tannehill, I think at this point in his career, he's probably on the way out. This is probably going to be Tannehill's last year where he is a starter, because Will Levis is probably going to become their starter going forward. As long as he's an NFL-ready quarterback. I don't know. I mean, he did slide to the second round, which is a little concerning because there were some mocks that had Levis going in like the top 10. So I don't know exactly why he slid so far, but am kind of interested to see what he does in the NFL. The defense, I've always thought that the defense was like lackluster. I don't know their corners at all. I don't like their secondary outside of Byard. Outside of Simmons, they don't really have a dominant pass rusher. They don't have any standout linebackers. So it's like, I don't really know how they're winning all these games whenever they don't really have that much talent on defense. But I just kind of attribute that to Vrabel and really coaching these guys up. And really, I would have put this team lower except for the DeAndre Hopkins trade. I really feel like DeAndre Hopkins going to this team is massive because not that Hopkins is like still one of the best, he's unproven, but it adds the element to their offense they were lacking last year. After getting rid of A.J. Brown, their offense was way too predictable. They didn't have anyone on the outside that could make plays. Now they're bringing in a guy who can do that, which I think can really give them a chance to be a wild card team. And our next team is the Minnesota Vikings, a team that won a lot of games last year, but I consider them to be on the borderline because their defense was dreadfully bad last year. I mean, I can't remember if it was at the end of the year, but it was definitely very late into the season. We're talking like the last 2 or 3 weeks. I was looking at defensive stats, and the Minnesota Vikings were ranked dead last in the NFL. Not bottom 3, not bottom 5. They were the worst defense in the NFL at that point. I can't remember if they finished at that point, but they were that bad. And they even lost guys from last year. They lost their best corner, Patrick Peterson's gone. They lost their best pass rusher, and Zadarius Smith, he's gone. So their defense was horrible last year, and it probably is going to be even worse this year. The only reason they stay up here is their offense is extremely potent. I think they have one of the best young head coaches in the league, Kevin O'Connell. I mean, the job he did last year, he's a big reason why Kirk Cousins had probably the best year of his career last year. And I actually put Kirk Cousins in my top 10 quarterbacks, if you saw that list. You have the best receiver in football, the most complete receiver in football, and Justin Jefferson. You added Jordan Addison, who, I know about him pretty well, being from Pittsburgh. I've seen him play at Pitt. I was kind of hoping he would find his way back to the Steelers, but the Vikings grabbed him. I think he's going to be incredible, especially playing alongside Jefferson, who's going to draw the attention away. They have T.J. Hawkinson, a great tight end. Their O-line's okay. It's not great, but it's not horrible, so that's good. The running back situation, I forget the guy's name who's replacing Dalvin Cook, but that's a mess. I mean, I still think Dalvin Cook's an elite top 5 running back in the league. The fact that he's not on a team still kind of blows my mind, but it also kind of points to the state of the running back position. And we've talked about that enough throughout the Saquon mess, so I'm not going to get into that much now. But Minnesota, I really, really, really like their offense. There's a lot to like, especially having an offensive head coach. But their defense is dreadfully bad, and that's why I can't put them as a playoff team, or at least a playoff lock. They could maybe do it, but we'll see. Next team is the New York Giants. They're only in this category because Brian Daboll is the head coach. If you take him off this team, I'm probably putting them lower because I think the fact that they made playoffs last year, they really overachieved. I think it's very possible the Giants take a massive step back last year. And it's not that they lost anyone. It's just like I said, I think that they just massively overachieved last year. Daniel Jones, I really do believe that's a big outlier in his career. You're not going to see Daniel Jones be able to replicate that many times over his career. I've never been the biggest Daniel Jones guy. I said at his highest point, he's probably Kirk Cousins. I don't know. I still don't know about Daniel Jones, but the Giants clearly think that they found their guy, giving him $40 million a year. That contract to me still just melts my brain. I do not understand how Daniel Jones, who just a year prior, they were talking about like moving on from him and not even picking up his 5th-year option, to 1 year later. I get he had a good year. He didn't have a great year. He had a good year. They gave him that contract, and he's now making more than some really good quarterbacks out there. Like, I think he makes more annually than Lamar. So, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think New York just they're desperate for some consistency. They think they found their guy, whatever. There's things that I don't really care for about this Giants team. Like, they have a good left tackle, Andrew Thomas. Outside of him, their O-line's poopy. Saquon Barkley, I don't even know what to do with him at this point. We've talked about Saquon enough. I know he's back for another year, but like, how engaged is he really going to be? I don't love their receiving core. They did pick up Darren Waller. I think that's a massive upgrade. That's a steal for what they gave up for him. So I do like that. The defense, I think, is good. But again, they're another team that's in a really difficult division. You have the reigning NFC champs in Philly. You have Dallas, who's a perennial 10 to 12 win team, and Washington could be sneaky good this year. I like their defense, so I just don't know about New York. You guys let me know what you think about the Giants. And our last team for this tier is the Seattle Seahawks. I think Seattle's pretty comfortably going to make the playoffs just because the NFC is so weak for the wildcard teams that Seattle is very well ran. They've had 2 incredible drafts over the past 2 years. I really love the construction of this team. The only issue they might have is like they're lacking a bit of a pass rusher, but outside of that, their defense is really good. They're building one of the best secondaries in football. I mean, last year you got Tariq Woolen, who was a monster. Had he not been in Sauce Gardner's draft class, he probably would have won Defensive Rookie of the Year. They just drafted Witherspoon to add another corner there. You brought Bobby Wagner back, so there's a lot to like on the defensive side of the ball. We know Pete Carroll is obviously going to put some attention on that. And then offensively, I think they've built one of the best receiving cores in football. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and adding Jackson Smith and Jigba in the first round. That's scary. That's a scary trio. Those guys are going to make all kinds of plays. Kenneth Walker was incredible his rookie year. He's coming back off injury. You got Noah Fant, obviously, in the Russ trade, a good stable tight end. And then Geno Smith had by far and away the best year of his career. I mean, there's just a lot to like with this team. Pete Carroll, I think, is an elite head coach. There's very little holes in this team. Yeah, they're going to make playoffs. They're not going to – I'm not saying they're a contender or anything. They obviously – like, Geno is good, but he's not great. He has his limitations for sure. But in terms of just getting to the playoffs, I definitely see that for Seattle. And that has been the borderline tier. This is definitely the biggest tier out of all of them, but that has been it for today. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you listening. Please throw a comment down there. Leave a like and subscribe. Thanks.